Hey everyone, CoolKid here. With the release of Whispers in the Walls, Warframe was graced with the Fragmented bosses, hulking masses of limbs and stone that come in 3 refreshing flavors. This update also gave us our first ever super boss, the Fragmented One, which combines the attacks of all 3 variants into one fight, along with several unique mechanics to make it even more challenging. So, in today's video, we're going to talk about the Fragmented One's attacks, strategies for reducing it to dust, and what you get for bringing it down. Note that this video is going to reuse segments from my Analyzing the Murmur video, as I've already talked about this boss there. I am going to include some corrections and updates in this video, but if you've seen Analyzing the Murmur, then feel free to jump to the new stuff. This video is also going to be primarily from the perspective of a solo player, as the accolade glyphs require solo play. Alright, let's get into it. The Fragmented are the big bads of the Murmur faction, serving as their main boss enemies. They can be found on both the Fervo node on Deimos and the Isleweaver node in Duviri, though the Fragmented One only exists on Fervo. As it's the main subject of this video, let's talk about Fervo first. So, the goal of Fervo is to reveal the Fragmented boss by collecting 30 Eyes of the Indifference. This is done by collecting vials of eye drops to help the Vitrium see more clearly, which reveals the eyes. The eyes don't last for long though, so they have to be picked up quickly. After each search pulse, the Vitrium will take about a minute to pulse again, which locates more eyes. Enemies can enter the radius of the Vitrium to blind it, stalling the cooldown it uses for its search. Each Vitrium projects a yellow ring on the minimap, and kills while inside of this ring will reduce the seek timer for that Vitrium, so long as it isn't blinded. This lets you massively speed up the seeking phase, so you can find eyes much faster. I know a lot of people really don't like this part of the fight, but I always enjoy a parkour-focused challenge, so personally, I enjoy it a lot. Once all 30 eyes are collected, the player must enter the boss arena and battle the Fragmented Tide. This is a swarm of fragment enemies that, once defeated, will merge together into one of the 3 fragmented variants. Each variant has its own arena, as well as a few unique attacks, but there's still plenty of overlap. As such, I want to talk about what they all have in common first, just to make things easy. So, first of all, every Fragmented boss is immune to the viral status effect, as well as viral damage. This means that viral-oriented builds aren't that useful, and as such, it can often be better to take electric or radiation instead. All of the Fragmented bosses also drop a non-legendary Kavya arcane on death, which is nice of them. Each Fragmented has 4 basic attacks, which are shared across all 3 forms, as well as 2 variant-exclusive attacks. We'll go over each of these attacks in a moment, but something I want to highlight is that most of these attacks reveal several weak points on the boss. These manifest as glowing blue orbs going in a vertical line down the boss's body, and shooting these orbs ups your crit tier while also counting as a headshot for things like Incarnants and Argon Scope. Onto the attacks, the first is Arm Swipe, which is a basic melee attack. If the player gets too close, the boss will briefly wind up before swinging an arm at its assailant. This attack is pretty quick and deals a lot of damage, but it only activates if the player is too close, and it's pretty easy to dodge if you're looking out for it. The second attack is Unhealing Hands, where the boss fires 4 lasers out to a short distance in front of itself. The boss will then slowly march forward while opening up its midsection, revealing its weak spots. This attack is super easy to avoid, as you just have to stand back or flank the boss to stay alive. Because of the extended weak point exposure, this is a great attack for laying on damage. The third attack is Hidden Horrors, which starts with the boss rearing up, alongside its hands glowing. After a delay, the boss will slam its hands into the ground, launching 4 lines of arms that burrow across the ground in an X shape. These arms will attempt to seek out players, and on contact, they inflict both a stagger and a slash proc. The arms also linger for about 5 seconds after the attack ends, so your best bet is to remain airborne until they disappear. During the attack's windup, the boss's weak spots will be exposed, so use that period to apply damage before bullet jumping straight up to avoid the attack. I also want to point out that the slam itself and the burrowing arms are 2 separate things, so make sure you're not too close to the boss when it does this attack, as that'll hurt. The final shared attack only becomes active once the boss's first health bar has been depleted, Burrow. During the phase transition, the boss will become invincible and dig into the ground. After a short delay, the Fragmented will burst up from the earth, dive-bombing a player for both damage and a stagger. Upon emerging from the floor, Murmur will also spawn, making the second phase of this fight much more hectic. On the bright side, these Murmur units can be used to build stacks of galvanized mods and the like, which is something the first phase lacks. Also, while Burrow is used at the beginning of the second phase, it can be used throughout that phase as well, becoming just another attack in the boss's arsenal. Real quick, I want to mention one last Phase 2 behavior that's unique to Isleweaver. Once the boss burrows into the ground, 2 fragmented bosses will emerge, beginning a duet battle. The bosses share one massive health bar, and you can't kill them individually, as they both die once their shared health is depleted. Because both of these bosses can also individually burrow, murmur fragments are a much more constant presence in this second phase. Moving into the individual fragmented bosses, we have 3, the Suzerain, the Zelator, and the Anchorite. Each of these bosses has a unique head, and also gets 2 unique attacks, one in the first phase and then an additional attack in the second phase. Let's go through each of them now. First up is the Suzerain, which is fought in the Canyon Arena. This boss's first attack is Lash of Limbs, where it detaches its arms and spins them around itself. These arms each fire a laser, with one going low and the other going high. The low laser circles the boss twice, while the high laser circles the boss once. Once each laser has wrapped up, the boss will link its arms together and wind up an attack, exposing its weak spots while doing so. Once this windup is complete, the Fragmented will slam its arm down in front of itself, knocking the player down and dealing high damage. The hitbox of this slam is very tall, so it can't easily be jumped over, and it's very long, so running away Prometheus style isn't gonna help either. I find this part of the attack is easiest to avoid by waiting for the boss to begin bringing its arm down, and then rolling or bullet jumping away horizontally. The Suzerain's unique Phase 2 attack is called Shrieking Wail, which starts with a large bubble that surrounds the boss. Projectiles outside this bubble can't pierce it, so you'll have to get up close, though the boss doesn't do any other attacks while channeling this one. In fact, the boss's weak spots are exposed the entire time this ability is being channeled, so it's a great opportunity to deal damage. After a time, the bubble will begin to shrink, drawing in nearby murmur fragments. These fragments will orbit the boss briefly before exploding outwards, flinging enemies and players alike. Our second fragmented boss is the Zelator, who can be found inside the cave arena. Its unique Phase 1 attack is the bane of my existence, Unearth. During this attack, the boss will very briefly expose its weak spots while it reaches into the ground. After about a second, it will burst up and throw 2 fistfuls of rocks, with these rocks forming a 180-degree arc. The first batch is thrown to the boss's right, and then to its left, being launched in quick succession. The grouping of these rocks is determined by how far away the player was when the rocks were thrown, so if you're close, the grouping will be tighter, and if you're far, the grouping will be more loose. Contact with these rocks deals high damage, staggers, and can leave you with a lengthy puncture, impact, or slash proc. The slash procs in particular are extremely deadly, and the stagger can easily set you up for more damage, especially in the second phase. Now, personally, I find this attack to be weirdly hard to avoid. The hitboxes and tracking are kinda finicky, so jumping straight up doesn't always work. As far as I can tell, the boss throws the rocks towards the player's elevation, so it's best to wait for the rocks to deploy before you try to dodge. The Zelator's Phase 2 attack, X Oblivion, is probably the most dangerous Phase 2 attack of any fragmented boss. The boss begins with a wind-up, expanding a ring across the ground that eventually pops into a swirling mass above the Zelator. This mass will begin spewing out small sparks that travel in an arc around the room, and contact with these sparks deals high damage as well as a blast proc. Fortunately, the boss's weak spots remain exposed during this attack, so while the sparks can be tough to dodge, this serves as a great time to lay on damage. The final fragmented variant is the Anchorite, who is fought in the Pit Arena. The Anchorite's Phase 1 attack is called Eye of the Void, where it will spawn 1 eye per player, with these eyes anchoring themselves to a wall. The eyes will project a thin laser that tracks their target, and after a delay, they lock in their placement and turn red. At this point, you've got about a second before the lasers fire, dealing high damage. This attack is very telegraphed and easy to avoid, only taking a roll to get clear of its hitbox. What's cool about this is that, if the laser is positioned in such a way that it hits the boss, then the Anchorite will stagger. This causes it to collapse to the ground and reveal its weak spots, temporarily opening it up to damage. The Anchorite's Phase 2 attack, Unholy Ground, is also quite dangerous. For this attack, the boss will segment its body and float up into the air, revealing its weak spots in the process. After a short delay, geysers will begin erupting from the ground, and contact with these geysers inflicts high damage on top of a stagger. This attack will also periodically pulse out rings that stagger on hit, so you'll have to play jump rope to keep your damage going. Or you can, equip that one mod. The geysers are very dangerous if you're not paying attention, but if you can find a safe spot, then you can apply damage to the boss with ease. Now that we're through the bulk of the fragmented info, it's time to talk about the most virile variant, the Fragmented One. This is a special version of the boss that can only be fought on the Steel Path, and it's accessed by continuing to collect Eyes of the Indifference up until you reach 60. This boss possesses the attacks of all 3 fragmented variants, even switching its head whenever it uses a unique attack to match the boss that said attack comes from. It can also be fought in any of the 3 boss arenas, though I'd personally recommend avoiding the pit as it's pretty cramped. In addition to all of the shared mechanics, this boss also has several unique mechanics, which I'll go over now. First and foremost, all attacks inflict an enhanced magnetic proc, which in addition to its energy drain and HUD scramble, also dispels buff-based abilities and locks the player out of future casts for 3 seconds. Attacks also deal enough damage to break the player's shields instantly, removing your shield gate in 1 hit. While I said that all attacks inflict this debuff, there is one noteworthy exception. The burrowing hands from hidden horrors do not inflict the magnetic proc, though the actual slam around the boss still does. In addition to this debuff, self-reviving is entirely disabled during this fight, and players who die are completely dead unless they're brought back by Nidri. Furthermore, Last Gasp's duration goes down by 2 seconds with each use, and the bleed-out timer gets shorter every time a player is revived, down to a minimum of 5 seconds. If you thought you could offset the difficulty by relying on help, think again, as Spectres, on-call crew, and air support are completely disabled in this fight. It is worth noting that Spectres can be spawned prior to starting the fight, and if you do so, they'll follow you into the fight itself. On top of that, enemy level increases the more players that are present, starting at 225 for solo play, and going up by 25 per player up to a maximum of 300 at 4 players. The boss doesn't play by these rules though, as Eximus variants of Murmur Construct enemies will continuously spawn throughout the entire fight, including the first phase. The Fragmented One also attacks much faster than the other Fragmented, so it's significantly harder to dodge. Certain attacks, like Burrow's Dive Bomb and Lash of Limb's Arm Slam, also gain much stronger predictive tracking. If all that wasn't bad enough, the boss also gains a new mechanic in its second phase, Cascading Fragmentation. This debuff sets in if the boss isn't killed fast enough, and it periodically deals damage. Every 60 seconds, this buff gains another stack, making the player take even more damage per tick, and it lasts until either the player or the one is killed. So, if it wasn't obvious, this fight is much tougher than the normal fragmented fights. Because of the enhanced magnetic debuff, you'll have to be sure you're keeping an eye on the boss and dodging everything you possibly can, as even just one hit can quickly spell disaster. Now that we're through all of the boss's attacks, I want to talk about strategies for taking it down, starting with weapon recommendations. Unlike every other super boss, the Fragmented One doesn't have status reduction, which means that status-oriented builds actually work here. This one change makes the One much more open-ended than the other super bosses, and a lot of options work very well in this fight as a result. Viral should be avoided as it doesn't do anything against this boss, but building into status effects like Heat, Electric, or Blast can be very useful. Heat is especially powerful in this case, as its consolidation mechanic lets you stack up damage throughout the whole fight. Because new Heat procs reset the duration of all existing Heat procs, you can snowball damage over a much longer period than other DOTs. On-kill conditionals are remarkably easy to use in this fight, as you can use the Fragmented Tide before the fight starts to build up your buffs. Eximus units spawn throughout Phase 1 to keep these buffs going, and the Tide's return in Phase 2 makes conditionals extremely easy to maintain. Eximus units also drop health, energy, and ammo on kills, so resources are fairly easy to sustain if you target them. The main concern in that department is that only Construct tier enemies spawn in the first phase, and they can be quite tough to kill. As such, things like magnetic damage and secondary fortifier are great here. Arcane Circumvent can also be used, but because several of these enemies fly, it can be kinda finicky at times. As always, Incarnants are incredibly powerful in this fight, as the boss's weak spots grant Incarnate charge. Weapons like the Sybaris and Sicarus are great for targeting these weak spots, and if you'd rather not rely on the weak point orbs, the Torrid and Angstrom don't even have to hit them to charge. The boss is incredibly large and slow, so if you don't want to play around the weak points, you really don't have to. Personally, my favorite weapon for this fight is the Burst on Incarnate, as it's just perfect for it. High crit, high status, high rate of fire, it's fantastic for hosing bullets into the boss. While I don't personally like melees that much in this fight, they are still very good for defeating this boss. Slam weapons, like the Sampites, Magistar, and Coda Meyer, are fantastic picks. They deal a huge amount of damage very quickly, so you can dive in and out to avoid attacks while getting in your damage. Glaives are also excellent in this fight, as their ranged element makes them extremely safe to use. Heat damage really shines in this particular context, as it lets you extend the massive damage from these attacks for a very long time. When it comes to helmet abilities, it's about what you'd expect. Roar and Zatas are great for this fight, as they're just more damage, though Nourish is actually not that good for once. Because the Fragmented One is immune to viral damage, all it provides is the bonus energy, so it might be more useful to take something like Bright Bonnet if you need the energy regen. Wrathful Advance is exceptionally good if you're relying on your melee, though I imagine that's fairly obvious. Smite is exceptionally good in this boss fight, as it can be used to instantly strip Overguard off of Eximus units. On top of that, its Smite Infusion augment grants a huge boost to radiation damage, which deals 50% more damage against the Murmur. I know that this section isn't very in-depth compared to my other super boss videos, but that's because the Fragmented One is just so much easier than the others. It may have a lot of health, but its massive stature, slow movement, and lack of status reduction all make it very easy to damage. The amount of viable strategies that exist against this boss is immense compared to the others, so I wanted to be more broad with my recommendations. Like the other super bosses, one of the hardest parts of this fight is actually surviving it. Sure, all of the one's attacks are quite slow and telegraphed, but they deal so much damage that even one hit can be enough to end your run. Considering how long it takes to get back to this boss fight, that's pretty annoying, so I want to go over some strategies you can use to keep yourself safe. Now, normally I tell you to jump ahead if you've seen this from the prior videos, but I actually do have a major correction about shield gating in this one, so I'd recommend at least watching to that part. With that out of the way, I want to start by talking about the secret sauce that makes any frame borderline immortal: catalyzing shields. To explain why this mod is so broken, I first need to explain how shield gating actually works. So, put simply, shield gating works like this. When your shield breaks, there's a brief window where your health can't take damage. Shield quantity affects how long the invincibility is, and it varies quite wildly. The minimum shield gate duration is 0.33 seconds of invincibility, while the maximum is 2.5 seconds, which is achieved at 1,150 shields. Shield gating also takes into account your highest shield amount before your shields broke. To explain what I mean, say you have that maximum 2.5 second shield gate when your shields are full. Your shields don't have to immediately break from full for you to get that 2.5 second shield gate, but your shields do have to reach full at least once before they break. If your shields break and then start regenerating, but only make it halfway full before breaking again, then you'll only get 1.25 seconds of shield gating, as that's the highest value you reached before they broke again. You can tell if your full shield gate is ready by looking for this sort of energized effect on your shield bar, as it signals that your shield gate is fully charged. With that explained, let's look at catalyzing shields, which reduces shield capacity by 80% in exchange for a 1.33 second full shield gate duration. The idea behind this mod is pretty simple. Lower the player's shield quantity so it's easier for them to get their full shield gate. Here's what makes it broken though. The 1.33 second shield gate duration is always in effect, not just when your shields are full. This means that, if you gain even one shield point before they break again, you'll get the full 1.33 second duration. So catalyzing shields is great, especially in combination with mods like Brief Respite or the Augur set, as ability casts restore shields. While energy is fairly common in this fight on account of the Eximus spawns, the nullifying attacks can still make this method unreliable. As such, there's another method that I find even more effective: recharge delay reduction. By using both Fast Deflection and Vigilante Vigor, we can reduce our shield recharge delay to a measly 0.2 seconds, making our shield start recharging almost instantly. Well, I'm pretty sure it's actually 0.25 seconds considering the math, but the arsenal doesn't seem to display hundredths, so that's annoying. Moving forward, we're going to work with 0.25 seconds as our shield recharge delay, even if the arsenal doesn't display it right. So, everything I've said about shield gating thus far has been correct, but there's a major piece that's missing. You see, while our shield recharge delay is 0.25 seconds on paper, that duration is only in effect if our shields haven't broken. If our shields break, then the recharge delay is 4 times longer, going to 1 second. Shield recharge delay starts counting down after the last instance of damage taken during the shield gate window, which has some very important nuance. So, if my shields break from 1 instance of damage and I take no additional damage during my shield gating window, then my shields will start to recharge after 1 second. This means that I'm never vulnerable, as my shields come back before the gating window ends. However, if I'm getting peppered with bullets during my shield gate window, then the 1 second recharge delay is going to keep getting reset until I stop taking damage. Once my shield gate has ended, then my shields will start recharging after 1 second, even if my health is taking damage. With that considered, dodging is still very important even if you're abusing this strategy, as it can minimize the amount of time that you spend vulnerable. The main weakness with this strategy is that magnetic procs do halt natural shield regeneration, which prolongs your vulnerability window, but once the effect wears off, your shields will recharge almost instantly. You can also take Arcane Nullifier to block the magnetic proc itself, which blocks the shield recharge penalty and keeps shields up almost 100% of the time. This combination of items, Arcane Nullifier, Catalyzing Shields, Fast Deflection, and Vigilante Vigor, makes you almost impossible to kill. There are still other survivability strategies I'm going to discuss, but know that this lineup is extremely powerful, even by itself. On the topic of shields, Arcane Aegis is also incredibly good in this fight, as it causes your shields to regenerate constantly while active. It isn't super reliable if you use Aegis exclusively, but in tandem with other forms of shield restoration, it can be a very valuable layer of redundancy. I also think it's important to bring up Rolling Guard, as its invincibility and status cleanse are super useful in this fight. You can use the invincibility window to stay alive while your shield gate is down, and the status cleanse can be used to save yourself from any slash procs that might be threatening to kill you. The main issue with Rolling Guard is that I roll to dodge things all the time, so I put it on cooldown accidentally, but if that's not an issue for you, then it's very worth using. The nice thing about all of these strategies is that they can be used together, and while it is very expensive to do so, they also make you extremely safe. Unsurprisingly, Vazarin is incredibly good for this boss fight. The invincibility from Protective Sling is borderline cheating, and the shield from Guardian Shell can block a lot of miscellaneous damage. Guardian Break is also an extremely useful buff, and it can help with shield gating while freeing up mod slots for other stats. Vazarin's main weakness is that, if nullified, you can't enter your operator, leaving you extremely vulnerable. On top of that, entering your operator can cause your Warframe to hold still long enough for an attack to connect with it, preventing transference back. Still, if you remain aware of what the boss is doing at all times, Vazarin is incredible. Considering the constant spawning of Eximus units in this fight, Secondary Fortifier and Arcane Circumvent are both phenomenal arcane choices. Player Overguard breaks quite quickly against most boss attacks, and the nullifying effects of enhanced magnetic procs do go through Overguard, but that's not a deal breaker. Overguard grants half a second of invincibility when breaking, so as long as you have any amount of Overguard, you'll be safe. Because so many Eximus units spawn, it's incredibly easy to refresh your Overguard in both phases of the fight, so abusing the skating window is fairly easy. On top of that, both Fortifier and Circumvent serve the secondary purpose of making the Eximus units themselves much easier to kill. Like I mentioned earlier, Smite is also fantastic for dealing with Eximus units, but that doesn't grant you their Overguard. The last thing I want to mention for this section is Arcane Escapist, which is a Warframe arcane that grants 1 stack of the Escapist buff whenever the player gets a Mercy kill. If the player dies with at least 3 stacks of Escapist, then 3 Escapist stacks are consumed to save the player, which also gives them 12 seconds of invincibility. This arcane can be built up before the fight even starts, giving you 3 free deaths, and the Eximus units that spawn throughout the fight can be used to easily refresh it. While I know this arcane is somewhat inaccessible on account of it being a temporal Archimedia arcane, it is remarkably useful if you have it. Now that we've covered all of the mechanics and strategy, what do you actually get for conquering the Fragmented One? Well, on your first completion, you'll earn a unique ship cosmetic, the Manus Sumdali. This Sumdali is a set of stony hands that grasp the front of your ship, and it looks pretty weird, if you ask me. It's kinda cool, but compared to the other Sumdalis, it's just not my thing. In addition to the Sumdali, the Fragmented One has 6 accolade glyphs, which are awarded for defeating the boss solo with the following frames: Vauban, Mirage, Protea, Gauss, Sevagoth, and Jade. On top of that, if you earn all 6 glyphs, then you'll receive a unique Honoria, Fragmented. While it's probably the easiest of the accolade titles to obtain, I can't deny that it still goes hard as hell. If you're struggling to get any of these glyphs for yourself, I'll leave a playlist of commentated accolade runs in the description. There, I'll show my builds, talk about my thought process, and show a full run of the boss with each frame. Do note that I already have the glyphs, so you won't see them actually drop, just to make sure you weren't confused. Alright, that's all I wanted to talk about in this video. The Fragmented One is a boss that will always hold a special place in my heart, and even after 2.5 years, it's one of my favorite bosses in the entire game. Sure, in comparison to every other super boss, it's fairly easy, but it's so much more open-ended. It spawns minions for conditionals, has no status reduction, and its giant hitbox makes it very easy to attack. I also think that its attacks are just really fun to dodge. Except for Unearth, that one pisses me off. Let me know in the comments if you found this video helpful, and please reply to the pinned comment with any strategies you use to conquer the Fragmented One. I try to be as thorough as I can in these videos, but I know that they're ultimately colored by how I play the game. As such, I want to put together a thread of community-sourced strategies that might work better for others. Beyond that, like and subscribe and all that nonsense. Thank you very much if you made it to the end of this video, and an even bigger thank you to all of my channel members who make this content possible. This channel is my full-time job, and that couldn't happen without their support, so seriously, thank you. With all that said, thank you again for watching, and I really hope none of you noticed that one of the members is named Cool Marilena Tailjob 369.